Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This next series is going to be the Art of Crochet, and this video specifically will be the history of crochet. Just like pottery, we find that maybe not crocheting specifically, but yarn and making clothing out of, we originally find that it was probably made out of flax, and which is a plant that they then mashed down and then made fibers out of that, and then spun that into a yarn and made clothing out of that. The oldest discovery that I could find was a 4,700-year-old ball of yarn that was found in a bog near Switzerland. So that brings us to 2700 BC. Scientists and archaeologists figure that the history of yarn at least goes back even further, with finding impressions on pottery, so the actual impressions of pottery, of clay pots, and then the tools like little hooks made out of bone, animal bone, wood, and horns. And then they have found spindles as well, along with looms, loom weights. So the actual yarn itself is disintegrated through the years, but there are direct and indirect examples of ancient yarn. They have also found charred flax and nettle thread alongside other artifacts like pottery. And there are burial contexts as well where linen fragments from the Nahel Chemer in Israel date back to 6500 BCE, so that's a little bit further back than the original example. But and a lot of Neolithic art occasionally depicts clothing and textile patterns on the art itself. So there's, like I said, there's indirect examples of how far back making clothing out of with a pattern can be found. The oldest terminology comes from the Norse region. It's called nålebinding, and that is a specific stitch that is not technically used that much in today's crochet world, but as it goes through the years, like I said, you probably started out with a flax seed or a flax fiber, and then a linen, which can be found all the way back to 5000 BC in ancient Egypt. There's also linen examples found in Greece. Wool from sheep becomes a main source for yarn, stretching back all the way to 3000 BC. And then we go back to Egypt, where some socks have been found that have been either knitted or crocheted. The Rasiduzi technique from Iran started in the Arabia region and spread to outer regions from there. And then back in Egypt, it's been found in tombs there from 300 to 900 AD, and there's examples of it in Europe and South America and Asia. So in between 300 and 1600 AD, we finally see the spread from the Middle East to China to Northern Europe to even South America. So then in 1600 AD, the official term crochet is mentioned, and the etymology of the word crochet comes from the French, where they called it crochet lace or dentelle au crochet. And in England they called it chain lace, and then in Italy they called it marletto della suore, or nun's lace, because the nuns were typically the ones who would crochet in Italy during that time. As we fast forward to the 19th century, in 1823, the first recorded crochet pattern of a little purse was published in a Dutch magazine called Penelope. Then there was an Irish woman named Mademoiselle Reggio de la Blanchardiere, who kind of founded the idea of Irish crochet, which during the potato famine was a means to help support the family by selling the crochet works. And then as the Irish immigrate to America, that's one of the cultural influences from immigration that America gets from the Irish and other cultures as well. In 1901, the Queen Victoria was gifted a crochet kit with a crochet hook and I think a pattern as well. And fast forward a little bit further to World War II, knitting and crocheting were essential to providing clothing for the soldiers overseas, both mainly in the Allied forces. Fast forward a little bit more to the 60s and 70s, where granny squares become very popular and still to this day have a huge influence in the fashion world and crocheting in general, involving to a mental health hobby in itself, just to do something hands-on, a little art therapy. Also during the 60s and 70s, nylon and polyester became a go-to fabric because it didn't shrink as much as wool or cotton, and it was a lot easier to clean in the end as well, but they did lack the ability to like the feeling of nylon, and the synthetic fibers definitely don't hold up to a really nice wool, cashmere, merino wool textile. So those are also being introduced back into today's world. Referencing Australia, there is a huge merino wool export to around the world from that country. So, and like Ugg boots are merino wool, and so that's just a little brief history of crocheting, a little bit of yarn, a little bit of knitting. So next week we get into techniques and certain types of stitching, and go from there. See you next week. Bye, love you.